The film opens in 1974 with a conflict veteran named Max Erikson sitting on a metro train. When a youthful Vietnamese lady boards the train, Erikson looks at her with a grieved look. She suddenly reminds him of his time in the Vietnam War. The scene then transitions to a flashback during the Vietnam battle in 1966. A group of American scouts receives a mission to search for secret tunnels used by the Viet Cong to launch surprise attacks. One night, while they're in a thick forest, they hear mortar fire. They check the map and realize that nearby soldiers are under attack by the enemy. Lieutenant Riley instructs his team to listen to the gunfire to determine the enemy's location and then inform the base camp about their current location. Unexpectedly, out of fear, one of the soldiers starts shooting at a Vietnamese fighter. This ruins their disguise, and the enemy is alerted to their location. Soon, mortar fire starts pouring down, and several soldiers are killed while others scramble to safety. Meanwhile, young Private First Class Max Erikson, who is watching alone, seeks cover when he hears an explosion nearby. Suddenly, the ground shakes, causing him to fall into a hidden Viet Cong tunnel where his legs get stuck. As air support arrives and begins to attack the enemy, Erikson remains trapped in the tunnel. Unbeknownst to him, a Viet Cong warrior with a knife approaches him silently through the narrow tunnel. Before he can attack, Sergeant Tony Mezer manages to save Erikson. The Americans then regroup and steadily bring down the enemies. The following morning, Erikson, Mezer, and their squad, including Corporal Thomas Clark, Private Hatcher, and Sergeant Brownie, go to a nearby stream town for temporary shelter. Erikson is different from the rest of his crew because he's sympathetic to the local children, unlike his comrades who are suspicious of everyone in Vietnam. Despite the tense atmosphere of war, Erikson preserves his humanity by treating the locals respectfully and offering help when needed. Later, Sergeants Brownie and Mezer remind their soldiers of the importance of obeying orders without question, especially as their time in Vietnam is coming to an end. However, at that moment, Viet Cong soldiers hiding in the bushes along with local informants suddenly open fire on the Americans, fatally injuring Sergeant Brownie. This surprises the American soldiers completely, but they manage to repel the attack and kill the enemies. Following this incident, Mezer's squad is given a 48-hour leave, and they plan for a night out in the nearby town. However, their leave is abruptly cancelled, and they are ordered to report for patrol at 6 o'clock AM the next day. That night, they carry out a scouting mission in the area. Mezer, saddened by the loss of his dear friend Brownie, expresses his desire to seek comfort in the company of a local girl in the nearest town. Later that night, the squad arrives at their station gate to venture into the town. However, a guard and their company leader deny them entry to a brothel. The commander informs them that the area remains off limits to them. Thus, the squad is forced to remain confined to their location until further orders are given. Understanding their situation, the soldiers head back to the military barracks and wait for their morning march. Sergeant Mezer then introduces Private First Class Antonio Diaz to the group as a replacement for the late Brownie. Mezer briefs the squad on their next mission and reveals that they will depart the next day, 2 hours earlier than planned. He wishes to visit the neighboring town and kidnap a local girl for their own satisfaction. Erikson is shocked by his superior's insane and criminal statement. He shares his concerns with his friend, but the latter reassures him that Mezer cannot be serious. Tragically, the next morning, the squad reaches the town and forcibly takes a little girl named Tin Thao away from her family. Mezer informs Erikson that they will have fun with the girl once they get to their station. Soon after, chaos erupts in the town as relatives beg the soldiers to spare the girl. However, the soldiers choose to ignore all their pleas. Instead, they commit a heinous act against the girl's sister, leaving Erikson shocked and unable to believe his comrades could do something like this. After capturing the town girl for their sick entertainment, the soldiers continue with their duties. Erikson confronts Sergeant Mezer, insisting that what they've done is a crime, but the latter ignores his complaints and sends him on patrol. Meanwhile, Private Hatcher and Corporal Clark see no issue with Mezer's actions, treating them as entertainment. Later, the group takes a break and attempts to interact with the captive girl. Clark approaches her first, but he is interrupted by Hatcher, who thinks he sees someone in the bushes. He fires a shot, only to find it was just an animal. The squad then realizes that the gunfire might have given away their position to the enemy, so they decide to move on, postponing any further interaction with the girl. A few hours later, they come across an abandoned wooden cabin deep in the forest. While Mezer, Clark, and Hatcher scout the area, Dyers and Erikson clean up the cabin. Dyers turns out to be a decent person who doesn't want to abuse the girl since they share the same viewpoint. Dyers and Erikson agree to help each other. They want to ensure that no one is forced into committing a crime. Erikson then approaches the captive girl, showing empathy and care toward her. He successfully gains her trust and tends to her wounds. Later, when the rest of the squad returns to the cabin, Sergeant Meza proposes they forcibly interrogate the girl. He ties her hands and outlines the order in which the soldiers will have their way with her. Erikson is utterly horrified by the plan. He and Dyers oppose the idea, saying they will leave the assault. However, the sergeant threatens to make them outcasts if they don't comply. This scares Dyers, and he reluctantly agrees to participate in the terrible act. Infuriated, Erikson tries to help the girl, but Clark holds a knife to his throat, ordering him to stand guard for the night. A helpless Erikson then watches his comrades commit the appalling act. The following morning, the crew shows up at a hillside and positions themselves on a railroad bridge overlooking a Viet Cong waterway supply terminal. They leave the girl with Clark back in the lodge nearby. They spot a group of armed Vietnamese transporting ordnance shells and report the coordinates to base camp, keeping an eye on the enemy while preparing for their mission. In a little while, Erikson and Hatcher return to the station to resupply and get smoke grenades. When they arrive at the lodge, Clark becomes reluctant to stay with the girl, so he orders Erikson to take his place. Once they are alone, Erikson fully grasps the extent of her suffering. She is weak, cut, bruised, dehydrated, and sick. He feels terrible for her condition, so he unties her and offers her something to eat and drink. Back at the railroad bridge, Sergeant Meza is enraged when his men return without Erikson, so he orders Clark to return to the station to get him. The sergeant is worried that Erikson might do something drastic. Meanwhile, Erikson decides to help the girl return to her town. However, she is too scared to go alone, so she begs Erikson to accompany her. Erikson realizes that leaving the station with her would make him a defector, and he could be punished for this. Nonetheless, seeing the unfortunate girl's desperate plea, he decides to go through with it. Just as they are about to escape, Clark shows up and stops them. He forces them to rejoin the crew on the railroad bridge. Tragically, Erikson and the girl are dragged to the bridge and ordered to wait as the crew prepares to launch their attack. The girl suddenly starts coughing due to her weak condition. Meza realizes that she could jeopardize their position, so he orders Erikson to kill her. Our hero refuses, so the sergeant orders Hatcher to do it, but he also hesitates. As helicopters approach in the distance, Meza urgently orders Dyers to kill her. Under his superior's pressure, Dyers decides to do the unthinkable. At that moment, Erikson fires his rifle into the air to draw the Viet Cong's attention, successfully preventing the murder. During the ensuing shootout between the American and Vietnamese soldiers, Clark stabs the girl multiple times. Unfortunately, Erikson does not see this, as he's too focused on fending off the enemies. The situation becomes critical as the Viet Cong bring mortars up the river and start firing at the bridge. Meza and his team fight back, using a machine gun to take out the enemies one by one. Meanwhile, a severely injured girl gets up and attempts to escape through the bridge below. When Meza sees her, he orders the crew to shoot her. Erikson tries to stop them, but Meza hits him with his gun and knocks him down. After this, the crew shoots the unfortunate girl multiple times, killing her on the spot. Her dead body then falls off the bridge and lands on the ground below. Following the incident, Meza leads his men away from the scene while Erikson lies on the railroad alone. He faintly sees the American forces conducting an airstrike on the enemy's riverboat and also sees the girl's ruined body below. The subsequent explosion ignites a nearby Navy boat, killing its crew. Not long after, Erikson is evacuated by helicopter. He wakes up in a hospital and confides in his friend Rowan about the kidnapping, assault, and murder of the girl. Rowan understands his anxiety and urges him to talk with Lieutenant Riley. Erikson does so, but tragically, Riley responds with a lengthy explanation. He emphasizes how the incident could tarnish the unit's operational record and suggests that it would be best to forget it. Determined to seek justice, our hero risks his military career by defying Riley's orders and reporting the incident to Captain Hill. However, Hill also responds harshly and rebukes Erikson. He warns him that pursuing the matter could result in severe sentences for the soldiers and could lead to retaliation against Erikson and his family when the convicted men are released. Meanwhile, Meza learns that Erikson has reported the incident to the senior officers. This fills him with fury, and he decides to kill him with a grenade. That night, Erikson becomes suspicious when he sees Hatcher standing at the bathroom door and taking off quickly. Fortunately, he spots the grenade and quickly jumps out of the bathroom just before it explodes. Erikson then confronts Meza and the other culprits. He tells them that everyone already knows what they've done, but the authorities don't want to listen to him. He suggests they leave him alone because they are never going to be prosecuted for their heinous crime. Erikson later drowns his sorrows at a bar. A pastor approaches him and asks about his mood. Although Erikson knows that justice won't be served, he confides in the pastor about the horror of the girl's ordeal. Soon, an investigation is launched, and the girl's body is found in the riverside. This raises tensions within the unit, and Captain Hill informs Erikson that his actions will have consequences since he couldn't let the situation go. In the next scene, all the soldiers are interviewed individually, and they confess to their crimes. Thus, they are court-martialed. Meza is sentenced to 10 years of hard labor, Dyers to 8 years, Hatcher to 15, and Clark to life. As they leave the court, Meza leans in close to Erikson and whispers something inaudible with a wicked look in his eyes. "How dare you give us exactly what we deserve?" The scene then shifts to the present. Erikson wakes up from his haunting flashback on the train when it reaches the next stop. The Vietnamese lady who reminds him of the girl disembarks. He sees that she has left behind her scarf. Erikson quickly grabs it and exits the train to return it to her. When he approaches the lady, she notices a haunted expression on his face. When asked about it, Erikson tells her that he just woke up from a nightmare. The lady then thanks him for the scarf and offers him comfort, assuring him that his nightmare is now behind him. As the film comes to a close, a faint smile appears on his face.